Welcome back and thanks for staying with us. We continue then to discuss the warrant of arrest that was issued by the International Criminal Court for Russian President Vladimir Putin. Of course, this was over alleged war crimes in Ukraine. We are now joined by Professor Bheki Mngomezulu. Prof, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. But help us unpack, South Africa's stance here. As a signatory to the Rome Statute, that established, of course, the ICC, how should South Africa then proceed, especially given that President Putin has indicated that he might attend the BRICS summit in this country in August?
Thank you, Unat, for having me. There are quite a number of issues that need to be ventilated on this matter. First of all, we recall that the Rome Statute was signed on the 17th of July, 1998, and then the ICC itself was established on the 1st of July 2002. And the understanding was that all members that signed that particular statute were going to be bound by it. But the assumption was that there was going to be fairness and in executing that particular act. Unfortunately, this has not been the case. You might have seen that there are a number of countries that are not signatories to this Rome Statute and therefore are not members of the ICC and members of the Security Council, UN Security Council, that is including Russia, including China, including the US and many others. So the reality of the matter, therefore, is that the ICC is being used for political ends or for political expediency, as people would say. So to answer a question then in terms of South Africa was one of the first countries to sign the Rome Statute. And in fact, it was the first African country to sign the Rome Statute. And therefore, it became a member of the ICC. But then the way things have turned out is that there is no consistency in the manner in which the ICC operates. The case in point being the 2015 al-Bashir matter, which has been discussed by everyone today. So basically, drawing from that particular experience, the government said that it was not going to arrest al-Bashir on the grounds that he was not in South Africa as a tourist, nor was he in South Africa on a state visit, but had come to attend the AU summit, which was in fact a correct interpretation. But unfortunately, some of our opportunists went to court and then wanted the court to rule against the South African government and then said that they were supposed to arrest al-Bashir. As you know, then of course al-Bashir sneaked out of the country before the court judgment could be in fact read out. Now we do have that court judgment and there hasn't been any court judgment in between. So looking at things from that logic, then we might say that South Africa is therefore obligated to arrest al-Bashir. But the question is at what cost? What would be the consequences of arresting Putin if we were to come to South Africa to attend the BRICS summit? One, he would not be coming here state visit. And then two, he would not be coming here as a tourist. So the same logic applies as it applied in 2015. So therefore, South Africa is pressed between the rock and the hard place. On the one hand, it has to subscribe to international law, but then on the other hand, it has to follow its own foreign policy agenda. And in this case, there is no easy answer. But from where I'm standing, one option would be for President Putin to deploy someone else to replace him just to save South Africa. But if he were to come here, I would say South Africa has two options. One, to arrest him, and then, of course, to its own peril. And then the other one would be not to arrest him and then face the ICC. So for me, the latter is better. It's better to deal with the ICC, which is less powerful, less direction and everything, than to face Russia. Because if we were to arrest Putin, that will be a recipe for disaster, but for the country and then also for the continent.
Especially in terms of, speaking about consequences, especially, following what Russia essentially said, warning that it will be a declaration of war should anyone, act on the ICC's order. And to your point, you've pointed out several scenarios for South Africa. But it would be interesting then, we know that South Africa is due to meet several delegates, from Russia, Russian ministers, to discuss some trade trade and economic cooperation and so forth. Do you think that would possibly be on the table from South Africa? I know that Cabinet is obviously waiting for legal advice on this matter in terms of the warrant of a warrant of arrest. But is this something that South Africa can table with Russia openly during its discussions?
They have to. Russia and South Africa has cordial relations. Russia has an embassy in Pretoria, and there is also a consulate office in Cape Town. South Africa has an embassy in Russia. So basically, we have cordial relations with Russia, let alone the fact that people will always cite gross human rights violations. That is a case which we can discuss some other time. But the reality of the matter is we have cordial relations with Russia, and we have trade relations with Russia, we have political and diplomatic relations with Russia, and then historically, we also have strong ties with Russia. In fact, by the way, relations between Russia and South Africa did not start under the new political dispensation. Way back in 1942, South Africa and Russia already had relations, but of course it was a different administration. Under the current administration, the post-1994 administration, we have maintained the Federation, and therefore it means that whenever things concern Russia, we have to tread carefully, which is exactly the reason why we didn't take a position to criticize Russia at the UN Security Council on 2 occasions. And people said that South Africa did not take a position. I think they are missing the point. South Africa took a position, and the position was to be neither on the West nor on the East, but to say we are following our foreign policy, which puts forward diplomatic relations and not hard power in the form of arms, but of course to encourage negotiations and discussions. So that in itself is a position, by the way. It doesn't mean that we only take a position if we decide to kill or not to kill. We just say, okay, here's the situation, let us find the best way to address it. And South Africa says that is through diplomacy. So I think that is the context within which we have to understand this particular.
Prof, I want to loop back very quickly to what you said in terms of the inconsistency of, the ICC. I mean, in fact, in South Africa, some political parties have weighed in on this, including the SACP earlier on with my colleague saying that the ICC's warrant is not binding on South Africa. In fact, EFF leader Julius Malema argued that the ICC had failed to act against Western leaders, including former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, as an example, and former US Presidents George W. Bush and Barack Obama. And in fact, the SACP and EFF saying that, they are putting their position out there to say that Russia is, in fact, welcome in South Africa. Just weigh in on some of those comments that we are hearing coming out from political parties.
My sister, let's look at this issue in 2 ways. From a legal point of view, to abide by the ICC statute. So therefore, it means they have to arrest Putin. But from a political point of view, that would not be something that I would advise South Africa to do. In other words, a signatory to the Rome Statute, but it doesn't mean that we have to implement that statute without looking at the reality. Because the reality is that if we were to arrest Putin, definitely we might as well communicate with the men upstairs and say we are coming, we're on our way. Because that is exactly what is going to happen. Now, when it comes to inconsistencies, remember that I've said earlier on, the P5 countries, the permanent members of the UN Security Council, are not members of the ICC. But then the way it has been structured is that even if we are not a member of the ICC, the UN can in fact recommend that a warrant of arrest be issued against you. Ironically, the people who are making that recommendation are themselves not members of the ICC. So basically, that is something that does not make sense. In fact, it's senseless, to be blunt. It's senseless that we are not a member of the ICC, but we are using political ends. Now, one other issue that I can bring in here, which is a political issue, is that after the UN Security Council and after the UN General Assembly had debated this matter, South Africa did not side with the West. Is this not a way of punishing South Africa for not having sided with the West? That is a question that we need to contemplate on. Because it means that they waited for an opportunity to punish South Africa for not siding with the West. And this is the great opportunity to do that, because currently South Africa is the chair of BRICS, and of course then President Cyril Ramaphosa has an obligation to send out the invitation letters, including the one going to Vladimir Putin in Russia to come and attend the summit. Now, after the letter has been issued, then we have this ICC issuing against Putin. Why did they wait until it was on the eve of a meeting? Because the meeting is happening in August this year. So it means that plans are already underway. Why didn't they do this? The war against the Ukraine started on the 24th of February last year. So have no atrocities been committed between that time and June last year or even December last year? If the answer is in the affirmative, why was no action taken until now that South Africa is about to host the BRICS summit? Then you issue this particular warrant of arrest. So I would say from a legal point of view, South Africa is bound, but then from a political point of view, that is definitely a no for me. South Africa must not arrest Vladimir Putin, even if we were to come here, because that will have disastrous consequences.
There were suggestions way back, with the al-Bashir incident in 2016. In fact, the former President Jacob Zuma suggesting that perhaps South Africa should use the opportunity to withdraw and, from the ICC back in 2016 already. Would this particular incident see South Africa finally pulling out of the ICC, because it seems like it continues to draw criticism from the West, irrespective of what it does in this relation, especially if you draw back, to the 2015 matter, and also, as you've just rightfully said, again, South Africa receiving criticism for its neutral stance in the Russia-Ukraine war.
A short answer on that will be yes, of course, there will definitely be consequences. Let's have that one on the table. And then, of course, yes, South Africa can use this incident to withdraw from the ICC. But with not an event that you can start today and complete tomorrow. It's a lengthy process. Until such time that we have formally withdrawn from the ICC, remain bound by its terms and conditions. So it means, therefore, that between 2015 and now, there are things that we should have done. If we have not done those things in terms of exiting from the ICC, we cannot then say, and now that we have a fresh warrant of arrest against Vladimir Putin, and therefore, in response, we are saying that we are going to withdraw from the ICC. Of course, you can take that position, but that position will not be actioned until a couple of years down the line, because, as I say, exiting from the ICC is not an event, it's a process, and that process will take a very long time. But yes, indeed, we have all the right to withdraw as much as we had all the right to join the ICC. The onus is on us. Other African countries already made pronouncements immediately after the al-Bashir matter. The likes of Burundi and a couple of other countries in Africa saying the time is ripe for us to withdraw, but we didn't.
Prof, thank you so much for your time this afternoon and giving us that analysis. Professor Bheki Mngomezulu is a professor of political science and international relations, just weighing in on this ICC matter.